All right, so I'm going to do a sample program from the book. This is example 2.5 in your book. But the idea behind this program that we're going to write is we're going to get a subtotal from the keyboard. We're going to get a gratuity rate from the keyboard. And then we're going to output what that gratuity amount is. In other words, gratuity times subtotal. So what would the amount of tip we're leaving? And then also the new total. Okay? So let's get started. The first thing that we should do is, even before we get this information, is we're going to have to declare our variables. Okay? And so for this particular program, we're going to have a double of subtotal. We're going to have a double of the rate, that gratuity rate. We're also going to have a double gratuity, so this will be our gratuity, that's not spelled right, gratuity, where we'll do our gratuity calculation and put it into that particular variable. And then we also have a total, which is the gratuity, the tip amount plus the new subtotal. Okay, the tip amount plus the subtotal. Right, that's what I said. Okay, great. All right, so declare our variables. Next step is to get a subtotal from the keyboard. Okay, so this is good practice. Remember, when we're getting information from the keyboard, we have to set up that scanner class. So we have to create a worker bee, if you saw my last variable, a little worker bee of a scanner type. And I'm going to call that worker bee scanner input. And I'm going to say create a new instance. So a new bee is born, new scanner. And then this is system.in, which is our default from the keyboard. Don't hit tab there. Okay. We've got these squiggly red lines because our IDE is telling us, I don't know where to get information about a little worker bee that's a scanner type. So we have to tell it where to look for it. So we need to import some code that is already written so it knows where to find this information. So input, this happens to be in Java util.scanner. And so we'll learn more about this as we go along. This is sort of a shove you off the deep end part of the application, but it's important because it's how we get information from the keyboard and makes the program a little bit more meaningful. Okay, so now we're getting information from the keyboard. Well, at least we're setting up our ability to get that information. And we want to ask for the subtotal. So in subtotal, we are going to keep whatever we got from that. How do we get that information from the keyboard? Well, we ask our little worker bee, hey, input, can you use that method that you know how to do called next double? In other words, can you go to next double, run this method, which is going to prompt the user. It's going to sit at the keyboard and wait for the user to input a value, a double value, and that's going to be put into double subtotal, which we also declared as a double. So double, 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 double trouble. Okay, so get a double, put it into subtotal, which is a double. Okay, that's what I meant to say. Fantastic. All right. But just sitting with a cursor at the keyboard doesn't really have a whole lot of meaning, so we should give them some kind of prompt, system.out.print. I'm just going to use a print this time. I'm not going to use a print line. And the reason I'm not using a print line is because at the end of my prompt here, in other words, enter in the subtotal, I don't want to enter a new line. I want the cursor to sit at the end of this line waiting for some input. And so now the cursor will be waiting at the end of this prompt, and whatever value is typed in will be put into subtotal. Fantastic. Okay, so we're good so far. But we also need to get the gratuity rate. So we need to do the same process to get the gratuity rate. Now, as a new programmer, your first inclination is, okay, I've got to start this whole story over again, and so I'm just going to copy and paste it. And now instead of, oops, I guess I'm going to need to get, so I'm going to copy and paste that in. And instead of subtotal, now I need to know what the rate is. Okay, so the idea here behind this chunk of code is that I need to get from the user what the gratuity rate is. Enter in the gratuity rate. In other words, did you want to tip 15% or 20%, or what did you want to do there? Okay, so we do have an error message, which is good. And well, error messages aren't good, but the idea behind this error message is that once we've declared our little worker bee and we've given him a name, we don't need to create another object of this type. We can use that same worker bee to get another double value and put it into our new variable. So don't get into the feeling that you have to keep creating this. Once you've created this scanner input little worker bee once, you can put that little bee to work to get more input from the keyboard. Okay, so let's see what we've accomplished. We have gotten the gratuity rate from the user, and we've gotten the subtotal from the user. So now it's time to do some processing. So we need to make the calculation. All right, so we have total. Let's see, what is our, I guess we could do gratuity. Gratuity is equal to subtotal times rate. We'll leave that there for the moment. And then I also need to calculate the total. Total is equal to subtotal plus the gratuity. Gratuity, that's really, okay. And now that we've made our calculations, in fact, we should probably put a little process our totals. And then we need to output. So our output will be system.out.println the gratuity is, and now I can use my little concatenator is. Now when I'm concatenating, I'm adding a string to a double, which is what we're doing here, right? Java is automatically converting this gratuity into a string so that I can concatenate it. If it didn't, we certainly can't add a string plus an actual number. So the conversion is being done for us, and I can continue on my merry way here. Total is concatenate, convert my string of total here, T-O-T, yep, that looks good, okay. And then quick perusal to make sure I don't have any ugly red squiggly lines, and I think I'm good, so let's see what happens. So I run it, enter in my subtotal for 50. We'll make our gratuity rate 15%, and the gratuity is 67. Wow, that's pretty big gratuity. So I think we need to probably do some kind of alteration on our conversion. And let's see, not on our conversion, but on our calculation. So let's divide that by 100. So we had a logic error, and certainly don't want to calculate that much tip. Now let's try it. 4.50. Enter in the gratuity rate at 15, and that looks a little bit better. Okay, so their total check would be 1.18 and what have you. Okay, so I want to add to the program a little bit, and I want to emphasize a little bit more about constants. So we don't have a constant here. What I'd like to do is I'm going to eliminate rate being input from the user. So let's see, I'm going to comment this part out. I'm going to automatically assume that the gratuity rate is 20%. I want to make sure that my waitresses get lots of extra money. So I'm going to create rate here instead of it being received from the keyboard. I'm going to use the keyword final, which is converting this variable to a constant. It needs to be of the double data type. But because it's a constant, I'm going to capitalize the word rate instead. And this isn't something that you have to do in Java, but as coders, good programming practice dictates that any constants that we create, we capitalize. Makes it easier to read, and it makes it clear that that's a constant. Anytime you create a constant, at the time that you declare it, you also have to give it a value. And so I'm going to give it 20. Now, some of the advantages of creating a constant at the very beginning is, oops, I meant to get rid of the space, not the 20. Later on in the program, because this has been declared as a constant, I can't change it. So during the program, I can't say rate is now equal to 15. You'll see that I can't even compile this. I get an error message right off the bat that says cannot assign a value to the variable rate, and that's because it's already constant. The other reasons why you would want to do this is to create a constant variable name is if we just put in rate here as 0.20, that's not as easy to read, that's not as clear to read as the word rate. So now we have a visual that by reading the variable name, it's more descriptive of the number that was put in there. So we prefer to give a rate a variable name. Again, a constant. We're not going to change that throughout this code. But maybe after I send this code out, customers are getting mad because they didn't like being charged 20% automatically. They felt 15 was a fair charge to be defaulted to, I guess you could say. So now all I have to do is change the rate here on this line, and anytime I used rate there throughout the program, the 15 would be used instead. So let's see, I don't have any red squiggly lines, rate is referring to here, and so now when I run the code, I should just be asked for the subtotal, 4.50, and the new gratuity rate is automatically flows into my program. So we've covered quite a number of things in this particular application. We've reviewed importing the scanner class, which we used for our input. We had to create a new object, a little worker bee that we called input. We saw that we could use input more than once. We didn't have to create more instances of the input worker bee in order to use it. Let's see, I guess I commented it out, but that would be here. Okay. We made sure that when we use a little worker bee that we got the appropriate method, next double, next int, next float, whatever happened to be that matched the data type of our variable. And let's see, we use the system.out to output prompts to our users. And in the end, then we concatenated our strings. They all got converted into a string so that we could output the final result in the end. So that is example 2.5 in our book.